There's a certain type of person who walks into Harbor Freight and doesn't browse. No wandering, no comparison shopping on their phone, no standing in the power tool aisle debating whether they actually need a bench grinder. They move like someone who already knows where they're going, because the list they're shopping from wasn't built from YouTube videos or forum threads. It was built by years of learning what happens when the thing you needed wasn't there. Combat engineers who rebuilt road crossings under fire, logistics NCOs who kept convoys moving through flooded terrain at 2 in the morning, corpsmen who solved medical problems with whatever was within arm's reach. These aren't people who theorize about collapse. They've operated in the conditions that preppers plan for. And when they hit Harbor Freight, they load up on specific items that almost nobody else in that store is reaching for. The store wasn't built for survival. It was built for budget contractors and weekend hobbyists. But buried inside that cheap fluorescent-lit inventory are tools that translate almost perfectly into grid-down utility. Not because anyone designed them that way, but because physics doesn't care about context. The guys who know which ones aren't guessing. They're pattern matching from experience in scenarios where a missing tool wasn't an inconvenience. It was a cascading failure with consequences that lasted weeks. Today you're getting that list. The order here is intentional. The first 3 items are about moving things. The middle 2 are about working after dark and cutting through anything. The last 2 are about keeping your body intact long enough for any of it to matter. That sequence isn't arbitrary. It's the order problems actually appear. The first item is the one most civilians look at, nod at vaguely, and keep walking. The come-along. Hand winch, ratchet cable puller. Most people who pick one up assume it's a niche car recovery tool with limited application outside of that specific scenario. That assumption will only become wrong when you actually need it and don't have it. Picture 3 days after a major ice storm. A full tree, not a branch, comes down across your driveway. Your vehicle is on the wrong side. No chainsaw fuel, no neighbors available, no tow truck running. Just you, the tree, and whatever's in the garage. A come-along changes that problem completely. Hook one end to the tree, anchor the other to any fixed point, another tree, a vehicle frame, a fence post rated for load, and start ratcheting. The mechanical advantage built into the device converts 150 pounds of human effort into over 2,000 pounds of cable tension. That's not an estimate. That's the physics of a compound ratchet system doing exactly what it was engineered to do. There was a combat engineer, Martinez, at a forward operating base when a heavy vehicle slid off a berm and blocked the only exit lane at 0200. 5-hour manual clearing job, minimum, without the right equipment. He had a come-along in his kit. 40 minutes later, the lane was clear. The men watching thought he'd done something clever. He hadn't. He'd done something physical with a tool that costs about as much as a decent lunch. The come-along isn't a specialty item. It's a force multiplier hiding in plain sight on a shelf that most people walk past on the way to the power tool section. And here's what makes it particularly valuable in a real crisis as opposed to a planned one. It requires no power source, no fuel, no battery, and no second person. One human being and a $20 tool can move something that would otherwise require heavy machinery or a team of 6. In a grid-down environment where machinery isn't running and teams aren't always available, that self-contained mechanical capability is worth more than almost anything else you could buy at the same price point. Now, toe straps. And before anything else, here's what most people don't know, because this is the part that could genuinely save someone's life. When a chain or a rigid recovery strap goes taut under load and fails, it doesn't drop. It stores all that kinetic energy and releases it in a fraction of a second, turning itself into a projectile. There are military after-action reports from vehicle recovery operations where chains struck personnel who were standing nearby, watching, doing nothing wrong, not near the vehicle, not handling the equipment, just standing and watching. A nylon toe strap behaves completely differently. The material stretches slightly before failure. It absorbs energy progressively. When it fails, it drops, not flies, drops. That one physical difference has consequences that matter when the people around you aren't wearing body armor. The straps themselves are rated for 3 to 5 tons and cost somewhere in the $10 to $20 range. But the value isn't the price point. It's the versatility that experienced operators accumulate over time. The loop design makes rigging fast without knot tying, which matters when you're working in the dark or with cold hands. The width distributes force across a larger surface area so the strap won't cut into a tree trunk under load the way rope does. An NCO who ran logistics convoys through 2 rotations keeps 4 of them in his truck at all times. 2 he's used for vehicle recovery. 1 went to lashing a cargo frame to a roof rack when the original tie-downs failed mid-route. 1 he's never needed. He says that one is his favorite because that's what adequate preparation actually feels like. Where tow straps handle recovery and rigging, the folding hand truck solves a completely different problem. And it's the one that grinds people down faster than anything else in a real sustained crisis: moving stuff. Water weighs 8 pounds per gallon. 1 5-gallon container is 40 pounds of awkward, handleless, spine-compressing misery. Now multiply that by the number of containers you need to move over the number of days you need to move them, without the physical recovery that a normal life allows between efforts. During Harvey relief operations, a volunteer team watched people carry single jugs from a distribution point to their vehicles, bent over, slow, trip after trip in the heat. One guy showed up with a folding hand truck and moved 6 times the volume in a third the time without breaking a sweat that anyone could see. The people watching him looked almost offended, like someone had changed the rules without telling them. Back injuries from improper load carrying are among the most common casualties in both disaster response and deployed operations. And in a real collapse scenario, a thrown-out back isn't something you rest through over a weekend. It's a multi-week liability at exactly the moment you cannot afford one. Men who humped gear over mountains understand load management as a survival variable, not a comfort preference. The folding hand truck collapses flat, fits in any vehicle, and turns a 2-person carry into a 1-person job. You can find them at Harbor Freight for roughly the cost of a fast food run for 2. It's among the highest impact purchases on this entire list. Here's something counterintuitive about darkness. It doesn't kill people the way fire or floodwater does. It kills them slowly, by degrees, in ways nobody notices until it's already happening. Work output drops, decisions degrade, tasks that take 20 minutes in daylight stretch to an hour under a headlamp. Conflicts between people increase. Sleep becomes fragmented because the circadian signal is gone. Children become harder to manage. The atmosphere of a household quietly compresses towards anxiety, and nobody logs it, nobody tracks it. It just happens until someone makes a bad call or gives up on something they needed to finish. Bases that ran proper ambient lighting maintained morale and work output across weeks. Outposts running purely on tactical lights, headlamps, flashlights, weapon-mounted illumination, felt different, tighter, more reactive, more prone to friction. Same people, same equipment, different light source, entirely different operational reality. A headlamp illuminates whatever you're looking at. A battery-powered LED work light on a tripod illuminates a space. It fills a room with normal-feeling visibility. Watch what happens when you place one in the corner of a dark shelter. The whole psychological feel shifts from emergency survival mode to something manageable, livable, and functional after dark. Harbor Freight carries them in the $15 to $40 range depending on size and output. With even a basic solar charging setup running a power bank, you can sustain them indefinitely. Veterans grab these because they've lived the difference between lit and dark at the operational level and know it isn't a comfort preference. It's a multiplier for everything that happens after sundown. Now the blade variety pack. And the reason to frame this correctly first is that the problem in a real emergency isn't cutting. The problem is that a real emergency hands you different cutting problems every single day without warning. Day 1. A section of drywall needs to come out to reach a burst pipe. Day 3. The fence uprights are metal conduit. Day 6. The only remaining firewood is a thick hardwood beam and it needs to come down fast. 3 problems, 3 completely different materials. Most cutting tools handle 1, maybe 2 of those. A blade variety pack, wood blades, metal blades, and demolition blades for a reciprocating saw, handles all three with the same platform, and it runs about the cost of a pizza. Demolition blades chew through debris with hidden nails and embedded metal fasteners, the material that destroys standard wood blades in under a minute when you hit something unexpected inside a wall or floor. And every blade is a consumable. It breaks, it dulls, it gets wrecked on material you didn't know was there. The instinct to buy the saw without buying what the saw eats is one of the most common and most costly mistakes in field improvisation. The blade pack is flat, cheap, takes up almost no space, and the gap between having it and not having it is the gap between finishing the job and stopping halfway through it with nothing left to work with. Gloves. And before your brain categorizes this as the obvious one, the basic one, the yeah, I know one, that reaction is exactly why it belongs on this list, because the injury you dismiss is always the one that gets you. A logistics veteran, 8 years in, 2 deployments, home renovation project 2 weeks after discharge, no gloves, civilian mode, relaxed. A rusty nail goes through the webbing between his thumb and index finger. Clean puncture, didn't seem serious. 48 hours later, hand swollen to twice its size, 103 fever, 3 days of IV antibiotics in a hospital he could walk to that was open, staffed, and stocked. Now run that exact same scenario 3 days into a grid-down event with no functioning medical system within reach. That hand doesn't end with antibiotics. It ends with weeks of compromised grip, lifting, carrying, and working. Everything your survival depends on doing because of a wound that a few dollars of leather would have stopped completely. The heavy leather welding gloves at Harbor Freight sit in the $3 to $6 range. They handle heat, sharp edges, abrasion, wire, glass, and the rusty debris that exists in enormous quantities after any structural disaster. 3 pairs minimum. They're stiff when new and ugly throughout their entire lifespan. You won't think about them until the moment you really need them. That's the entire point. The last item ties everything else on this list together, and anyone who's worked in military logistics will recognize the principle behind it immediately. Ratchet straps, not tow straps. Those handle recovery and rigging, which we've already covered. Ratchet straps handle load securing, flat webbing, J-hooks, toothed ratchet mechanism. A 4-pack costs about as much as a movie ticket. And the reason this closes the list is one specific capability that doesn't get talked about enough. One person, under pressure, alone at 2 in the morning, getting the job done correctly. You're moving critical supplies, water, food, fuel, under time constraint. The load is in the truck bed. You need it still in the truck bed when you arrive, not scattered across a road after a hard turn on a flooded highway. Ratchet straps achieve a low tension that hand tying with rope simply cannot match, and you achieve it alone, without a second person holding the load in position while you work the mechanism. The ratchet does the tensioning progressively until the load is locked and rigid. Mid-route stop to check the load, retension in 20 seconds. No untying, no re-rigging, no asking anyone for help. Done. That's the thread running through nearly every item on this list. The come-along works alone. The hand truck works alone. The blade pack works alone. The ratchet straps work alone. All of them function at 2 in the morning, in bad conditions, when you're exhausted and the person next to you doesn't know what they're doing, or there is no person next to you. That's not a coincidence. That's the selection criteria that experience builds over time. A quiet preference for tools that don't require ideal conditions to function correctly. That's the doctrine, not a shopping list. A framework built by people who've lived the gap between what they had and what they needed and came out the other side knowing exactly which tools close it for the least money. Come along, tow straps, folding hand truck, LED work light, blade variety pack, leather welding gloves, ratchet straps. Total cost somewhere between $80 and $130, less than most people spend on takeout in a week, and more useful than most gear setups that cost 10 times that amount. The guys who buy this, they don't post about it. They don't explain themselves in the aisle. They walk in, load up, and leave. The tools end up in a truck bed or on a garage shelf, unglamorous and unbranded, completely invisible until the moments they're the only reason something is possible that would otherwise be impossible. One question worth sitting with when this is over. It doesn't cost anything to answer right now. When the tree is across the driveway, the mud is up to the axle, the sun is going down, and nobody's coming. What's in your truck?